Tim Estradal here. I'm the host of Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk, our podcast that you can find on iTunes. I'm also the editor of PickupTruckTalk.com. Today we're talking about something unique, something you don't see very often in car reviews. We're talking about base stripped-down trucks. Remember when they used to have roll-up windows? They didn't have power locks, didn't have power seats, didn't have a radio that was really even more than the AM radio? Yes, they still exist. It's incredible, I know. Co-host Jill Ciminillo had one in the Windy City of Chicago. She had a 2018 Nissan Frontier. We're going to talk to her about the pros and cons driving around the Windy City. We're talking about how they look in the marketplace as far as buying one, the pros and cons to even buying one, and how much of an oddball it feels these days in the world of large luxury SUVs. So stay with us as we dive in more to base down stripper trucks. Jill this week had the pleasure of driving a stripped down truck. She had a Nissan Frontier. Tell us about this. We call them a stripper truck because it is the complete opposite of fully loaded, right?
It is the complete opposite of fully loaded. And, it's funny because I did a Facebook post on it and I called it weird. And I don't necessarily want to say weird in a bad way. It's just weird in that I have not seen any vehicle, not just a truck, but any vehicle that is this basic, probably since I first started writing about cars in the early 2000s. Because we are talking not only the key in the ignition, which to me is a little bit weird because you have so much with push button start these days, but you have to key to lock the door. You have to the crank windows. So, I mean, crank windows and everything, manual transmission, 5-speed manual transmission, manual seats. So it was one of those things where I got this and I was like, well, this is kind of peculiar. And not that there's anything wrong with stripped down or base. There, as you're going to tell us, there are plenty of people that's exactly what they're looking for. But it was just very intriguing that any vehicle in any fleet would be that basic.
Yeah, I think maybe what people don't understand is it is weird for us to drive these stripped down models because manufacturers tend to send us the fully loaded, all the features, whatever, because they figure it's easier to not write about a feature just as we choose to than it is to not have a feature in the truck. So they just put it all in there, and then you can kind of pick and choose what you want to talk about. So it is strange for us to get this, but people still buy these. This is still a big fleet buy, and there's some pros and cons here. And Jill alluded to it. I'm going to make a little statement here to the pros and cons. So one of the reasons that the pro that you would buy the stripper truck is it's less money, less interest, right? So you're going to pay less on the truck. It's a cheaper. Overall, it's a better financial decision than it is to buy a fully loaded truck because you can always add features.
Yeah, all in. Like the truck that I'm driving, I think on the website it says it costs $18,000, but with taxes, titles, dealer fees, everything like that, it's just over $20,000.
Yeah.
And that's without any incentives or anything like that. So somebody who's buying this truck is probably getting it for something like $17,000, I would think.
Yeah, if you can do employee pricing, incentives, and theft, there's not a lot of margin in these trucks, so you can't do. Yeah. There's not a big price there, but. To your point, we hear complaints all the time that every truck's about $35,000 or so. Well, this is a $20,000 truck, and so you have the less interest. You're paying less money on it. You can add features later. Catskin does leather interior. You can buy a new radio system. You can buy aftermarket power locks. You can buy aftermarket power windows. And the thing is, you can pay cash for that, so you're not paying interest on that. So financially, it makes a lot of sense. You can also make it your own. You can take the stripper model, right, and you can add shocks. You can add bigger tires. You can lift it. You can do things to it because you don't have all the play with all the features. The last thing is there's less things that break. Right? That's always a truck argument, right? So roll-up windows, things don't break and they're really easy to repair. However, let's talk about the cons, is that when you add those features, it is actually more expensive if you were to feature everything out individually from aftermarket than you would buy a package. There's no warranty on aftermarket stuff after a certain point, right? So let's say you add power windows. Well, there's no warranty on that besides 30 days or a year limited, probably limited things go bad kind of warranty. The other thing is if you lift it and do stuff to it, your lift kit will have a warranty to it. The truck will still have its warranty, but it's not a combo thing. So if you were to get repaired, you have to do a couple different things to different places. And then finally, you have time invested, right? So doing all these features, adding all this stuff to it, hey, it's great. I've always go back to that Jeep Wrangler story I had a while ago where guys were literally buying this, driving it off the lot to the aftermarket shop, spending $15,000 aftermarket shop, and like 2 weeks later getting their Jeep. If you got time to do that and you have the cash sitting around, more power to you. But typically you're going to spend several years adding all the features you want. And so by the time you get done putting all the features you want into it, maybe you're ready for a new truck. Maybe you're bored with it. You may be wanting something different. I mean, so there's some pro and cons there, but I do love stripper trucks. They're the core of what a truck is, and they take a while to bling, and then they're kind of fun to drive too. I bet you that was really torquey.
Yeah, well, and what's really nice, somebody on my Facebook page pointed this out, and whenever you get something that doesn't have a lot of stuff on it, you can really evaluate the vehicle for what it is because you're not distracted by, ooh, shiny object.
Right.
And so you really notice how the truck drives. You really notice the features that it does have. So this is a 2018 model, which means that, by 2018, it's pretty much mandated that you have to have a backup camera. So this does have a backup camera, but it's just your basic backup camera, but it does have the red, green, yellow lines, so you can see your proximity to things as you are backing up. And but really, at the end of the day, that's all you need in this truck. It is not, a gargantuan vehicle that really requires you to have huge side mirrors, lots of sensors. You get a really good sense of the vehicle just by looking out the windows. And it has apparently been a while since I've driven like a smaller truck because I just forgot that, not every truck has to be difficult to drive. And I've been driving around mostly the city, running errands and parallel parking and backing into my garage because I have a very narrow garage space. And while the turning radius isn't great, it actually moves very well. And again, being able to see out the side mirrors, I didn't even have to do the 20-point turn to get into my garage. I was able to just do the smooth turn to back in. And so I've really been appreciating the total visibility because I think that when you get too much tech, you tend to rely on the tech. Blind spot monitoring and the rear cross traffic alert and all great stuff. All really great stuff, but having this truck just proves you don't necessarily need it if you're paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, there's an ongoing argument, and you'll see it in forums all the time, that the new tech is making us worse drivers.
Oh, yeah.
And you just don't know how to drive as well as you used to because you're relying on the tech so much.
Yeah, well, and I think I posted a picture out there, too, of me driving with high heels. I had to drive it to a meeting last week and was in my high heels driving the manual transmission. And I was a little bit nervous that I would have problems going back and forth to the pedals because sometimes the heels that I was wearing are a little bit, like the pedal will slide into the heel and then it's a bad situation. But the pedals were thick enough and everything was fine. But yeah, I've actually been pleasantly surprised. It's been a long time since I've been pleasantly surprised about a test vehicle because you get something and a lot of times it's overhyped and you're like,
right.
But going into this, I really didn't have too many expectations and have been I don't know. And plus, I just like driving manual transmission. How many trucks can you get a manual transmission on these days?
Actually, the Frontier is one of the few. The Tacoma comes in a 5-speed or 6-speed. And what's interesting about the Tacoma 6-speed, I remember talking to them a couple years ago in Hawaii. The Tacoma manual transmission, the hottest market for that is the Northeast. States of New York and Pennsylvania, and Maine. They say they sell a lot of manual transmissions up to those states. And I asked them why, and they're like, oh. They're like, I guess it's people like it up there. It's a throwback thing. It's kind of interesting. That's where they get a lot of them. I don't believe the Colorado or the Canyon come in manual transmissions, and you'd be really hard pressed to find a full size truck in manual transmission these days. So yeah. they just don't exist. But it's not, the take rate is something they sell of that that vehicle across the whole spectrum. The take rate on manual transmissions in mid-sized trucks is actually surprisingly strong, because it's the cheaper price point. They want that cheap truck. That's what that is. And so, I remember asking Toyota about it as well, and they're like, "We're going to keep building it." Customers still want it. So, it's not a huge percentage of their sales, but they're like, we're going to still offer it. And another thing, I was talking to Sean Holman about it. He's the Truck Trend main editor, publisher kind of guy. And he said, that manual transmission in some of those trucks is a hidden gem. Like, you just, because most journalists don't drive it. They're not in the press fleets. You just never see them. I think the Colorado does come in a manual. Yeah, I'll get some comments on that later. But yeah, they're hard to find, but I just enjoy driving them. And it's funny because I'm watching you and you can't stop smiling about your experience of driving this truck.
Yeah. No, like I said, it's just, well, and again, I feel like I've been driving too many large trucks lately, and they're difficult to get in and out of, and then you feel like you're driving a boat. But this had, I won't say car-like ride, because it's definitely not a car-like ride, but it's easy to get in and out of. Usually when I have to get into a truck, I'm grabbing the steering wheel and pulling myself in, giving myself an arms workout as I'm trying to get in and out of the vehicle. But I almost can get into the truck like I would get into just a regular SUV, and just a hip hike and slide in. So I don't know. It's just, it's a very, dare I say, refreshing change. I don't know. I've appreciated the manual transmission. Obviously, I live in the city. I don't have anything to haul, tow, put in the back. Well, I will ask you this. So the other thing that I noticed in this truck is it doesn't have any kind of a liner in the bed. Does that pose problems, advantages, disadvantages?
A lot of people will do spray-in liners anyways. So you can get a Rhino liner, a Line X liner. I want to say they're several $100s, but you can have that put in. But for a fleet truck like that, a lot of times what you'll do is you'll get the truck, right? And you'll not put a liner in it, and you'll just beat the hell out of the bed, right? Mm-hmm. You go to sell it, and you just put a liner in it over, and it covers everything up. Yeah, I had an S10 that I didn't have a liner in, and I just beat it up, and then I went to sell it, and the guy, I said, sorry about the bed. He's like, no. He goes, we have a bed sitting out in the back of the shop. He goes, we just bring them in, put beds in, and screw them down, and we're done. And that's a slide-in liner. The spray-in is you actually have a spray-in liner. It's not that big of a deal. Fords and Chevy are notorious for going back and forth on this with the aluminum bed poking holes in, but I bet you 85% of people put a bed liner in anyways. Although you can put actually a bed rug down, which is it's a big thick piece of plastic, and it actually goes down in the bed, so that way things don't slide back and forth. But it's really not that big of a deal. It's not something that's mandatory. I've gotten some press vehicles from Toyota specifically that doesn't have them, because Toyota does not offer a spray-in bed liner from factory. They do from their distributors. So Gulf States Toyota will do it, but they don't do it from factory. And so something they've talked about having a factory option, but not everybody does factory options on spray-in bed liners. And if you're going to go out and beat it up and just use the truck, might as well. It's just going to, even if you get a little bit of rust in there, you can still just put a spray-in bed liner over it and just prime it up, or cut the rust off and fix it and put a liner over it.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I would guess this truck fit you pretty well, because I think I've been in Frontier similar like this, and it's not too tall, it's not too big, and it's easy. You can basically reach across the other side of the other door. You can put your purse down. You can get to both sides pretty easily.
Yeah, and I carry a relatively small purse. I don't have it nearby, but it's probably about this big, and it fit in the glove box. So if I wanted to run into the gym and take a class, I just stick my purse in the glove box and shut it, and you couldn't see it. Reaching across, probably not quite as comfortable for me if I needed to roll down the window or something like that. I couldn't easily do that without stalling the car or something. But the seats are really comfortable. Surprisingly comfortable. I have to tell you, my husband bought a Volkswagen GTI with cloth seats, and I have now had this new take on, because I was always a leather seat person.
Okay,
but
sure.
I am now fully appreciating and understanding the love of cloth seats, because they're just somehow a little bit squishier and comfortable for the long haul. So good seats.
And I would imagine they're not as cold feeling to you as leather is. So you probably don't need the heated seats on. I'm sure it's cold.
Good seats, but
yeah, I'm sure it's still cold in Chicago this time of year. But yeah.
Give me the choice between heated seats and not any day, and I will take them. So luckily, my husband's car has heated cloth seats.
Yeah. I just tend to think of these mid-sized trucks as being perfect city trucks. Like, you could definitely see somebody in the city owning this Frontier, having a kayak in their garage or something, and they go out camping or they go out on the weekends to go out exploring. And they just, this is their truck for that.
Yeah, well, and the thing is living in a city like Chicago, I'm always fearful of what I call the Chicago bump, as somebody like parking and they bump into your car to physically see if they fit in the space. That's how they park in Chicago. And so, and my husband parks his car on the street. And so I told him when we bought a new car in August, and I thought, we're so new car to us, not completely new because of the Chicago bump. And we bought used. We bought something that was 3 years old. So, however, I could see you could buy this truck new and not be overly concerned about somebody. Well, first off, nobody would want to bump into you because their back bumper would probably fall off. But, you're not being too concerned about the ravages of living in an urban environment.